This is part 4 of the 4-part video series that details the medical kidnapping of Ra. There is one update of good news since video 3, which I'm sure all of you following this story have already heard. Their newborn baby Aset has been rightfully returned to them. However, their son Ra is still in foster care.
I'm gonna make this a real quick live. Just know Aset is home. So we wanna say thank you. We still got work to do to get Ra back, but we wanna say thank you because of y'all and my family. We've had the proper support to get the best attorneys in the country. Still got to get Ra back, and we still got other babies: Aaliyah, Shiloh, Eddie Nakeba, Messiah, Zephaniah, Journey. We got a lot of babies to get home, but just know through the people, through you all, we were able to counteract this unjust system and this corruption to be able to get our baby back. So Aset is home, officially home.
Let's pick up right where we left off in the last video. So immediately after CPS investigator Danielle Mccoy came into the room to forcibly remove Ra from his mother's care inside of the hospital, Tyron was on the phone with Syesha. His first reaction was to call the police, and Syesha's was to remain with her son. And what they quickly discovered was that CPS's power sits on top of law enforcement, and the police were indeed there, but not to help them.
Danielle, why you can't? Ty, how can they take our... What?
We're calling 911 right now, and I'm filing criminal charges against this hospital.
The police are in the room with me, Tyron. But...
Well, we need to have another dispatch because there's been no criminal activity.
There was nobody that they could call for help. This was happening.
This is going to happen. It's going to. It is temporary. It's just a matter of how much more difficult you and Ty want to make this circumstance. Regardless, it is happening.
One thing should be abundantly clear now from this video series. The hierarchy of power in all of these medical kidnapping cases looks like this. The medical industrial complex sits at the very top of this power structure. Underneath them is CPS. They call CPS. CPS comes in and defers straight to their judgment. And then sitting underneath CPS is law enforcement, and they act as the muscle to CPS, so CPS can do anything that they want with your children. And this is despite the law being violated in many cases. This is despite the supreme law of the land, which is supposed to be the United States Constitution, being violated. So unbeknownst to them, possibly, who knows in all the cases, the police officers are actually being used to break the law. Here's one soundbite from Heather Scott, a state representative in Idaho, who has been working on legislation in her state to remove CPS's power and put more power into the hands of the parents for 2 years, and nothing has gone through.
What we have is incident after incident where CPS workers are bullying their way into citizens' homes, telling them they have no choice, they have to let them in. I also had someone, they said, we have more rights than police officers as a CPS worker. So all we did last year was try to pass a bill that said, hey, when you go to someone's home, just hand them this piece of paper and let them know their rights. You can get an attorney. You can refuse. You have the right to remain silent and you have these rights. And so the Health and Welfare Department had a fit. They did not, this would basically shut down the whole system and children would be beaten, and it was horrible. How dare us even suggest, how dare the legislature even make a comment like that?
Here is another active case happening right now that needs our attention as well. A mother named Kimrie Sellers, who on May 19th, 2021 had a healthy birth at Baptist Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky. At one point, staff wanted to take the baby to the nursery, in which she responded, no, I'd like him to stay in the room here with me. Just like any of us would want as well, right?
I can't even express the words, like to put into words how beautiful my baby was. And I just wanted to hold him. So immediately they were like, well, we need to get his temperature. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But they wanted to take my baby out of the room. And I'm like, wait, hold on. I was like, my baby's not leaving out of this room. Like, it's COVID-19. My baby's going to have to stay in the room with me at all times. I was like, is that okay? They're like, no, that's fine. I'm like, okay, well, then whatever you guys need to do, you can do it in the room. So they were like talking amongst each other, like if I was like doing something wrong, like if I said something wrong.
The hospital staff found her behavior hostile and aggressive, and this triggered a call by the hospital to CPS saying that although they have no current evidence, they feel like there might be risk of neglect in the future of this child. Miss Sellers was discharged from the hospital. She was packing her things up to go. A CPS worker came into her room. Miss Sellers said, "I've already been discharged. My baby and I have no problems. We're going to our ride outside."
We were discharged from the hospital. We had no problems. We had been there for 4 days. We had bonded. We were just doing amazing. I was marveling over my little 2-day-old baby when I was choked, assaulted, arrested, and my 2-day-old baby ripped from my arms. America, the people, the community. This is a serious problem. Look at how many mothers are standing before me, behind me, beside of me, that are losing this battle to this injustice system, who has authority.
Her baby was 2 days old. There was zero abuse or neglect. The police assaulted her. They then took her to jail for disorderly conduct and then stole her 2-day-old baby. Her baby has not been returned to her, and he is being severely neglected inside of foster care. To find out more about this case and how you can help Miss Sellers, go to OperationStopCPS.com. What this means is that as a parent, your power is sitting below 3 of the most powerful institutions in the world. Former Georgia Senator Nancy Schaefer referred to these as the unlimited powers of CPS.
I will share with you on the unlimited power of Child Protective Services. Parents are victimized by the system that makes a profit for holding children longer and bonuses for not returning children to their parents. This is abuse of power. It is lack of accountability. And it is a growing criminal political phenomenon spreading around the globe.
So now we all saw what would have happened to Syesha if she would have tried to walk out of the hospital with her son that day. From March 11th to March 25th, for 14 days, Ra was inside the hospital by himself. His family wasn't even allowed to visit him. It was just staff rotating in and out of his room. He had never been babysat before. In the 13 months of his life, he had never been away from his mother for a second. And then suddenly, all he knows is that she disappeared from his life. Can you imagine what his cries were like? Can you imagine the trauma that this baby's body had to experience and is still experiencing today, being separated from his parents still? Who is going to be held responsible for this trauma? Unfortunately, there's immunity granted and protection by the courts of almost every single person who has traumatized this family. And what was he doing in the hospital for 2 more weeks anyways? Did they end up putting the GI tube in that they had recommended before, even though it was medically unnecessary? No, they did not, because it was still medically unnecessary. So he sat in the hospital for 2 more weeks, drinking the formula that they gave him and taking his multivitamin. The very next day after the removal, there was an emergency court hearing held on Zoom. Tyron's mother was there to give her phone number to the judge, and she said that she wanted to be the one to shelter the child. First and foremost, we always try to shelter the child with a family member, Dennis Romano told me. But she was not even contacted until April. And then she was denied as a foster placement for her grandson. In a dependency court hearing, the CPS department attorney, along with the guardian ad litem representing Ra, both made statements that recommended to the judge that the grandmother not have her grandson because she's too aligned with the family. The family would have too much access to their child. So they placed him with a stranger in foster care instead. CPS is making some moves to try to cover their tracks. They have now moved Ra again, this time to an estranged family member and who is also still a stranger to Ra. So he's been moved twice in 6 months, both times with strangers. How can a stranger in foster care be a better fit for him than his own loving parents or his grandmother? Data consistently shows that even children who live in abused homes are statistically in more danger in foster care than they were just remaining in their home.
It has been reported over and over that 6 times as many children die in foster care than in the general public. Once a child is legally kidnapped and placed in official safety, the child is far more likely to suffer abuse, including sexual molestation and/or rape.
Another study conducted in Oregon and Washington found that adults who had lived in foster care for just 1 year of their life had a higher rate of PTSD than combat veterans. I recently listened to a podcast called Do No Harm by Ig Sba. It details the medical kidnapping of children from 2 different families. Listen to how one of the mothers, Melissa Bright, describes the state her children were in just after 1 night in foster care.
The moment the car pulled up, of course, Melissa and I run outside, and instantly we knew something was wrong. Mason, we get Mason out of the car first, and his face is swollen from crying so much. He's hoarse. He's so hoarse he doesn't even have a voice, and so he's trying to cry, but he can't even get any sound out.
And I'm like, well, how long did he have to cry like that before he became that hoarse? Why was he hoarse? Is he hungry? Has anybody tried to feed him? Or
and Charlotte, we get her out of the car, and here's my little girl. She's wearing somebody else's clothes. Not the clothes that we packed her. It's someone other kid's clothes. The dress that she's wearing is on backwards.
It's on inside out and backwards. She was almost yellowed in the face, and it's like she was so severely exhausted that she wasn't even cognitive of what was around her. There was no even recollection that I was there or that I was mommy.
And to make matters worse, Charlotte had a black eye. Melissa gasped when she noticed the injury, then lifted her daughter into her arms.
And I immediately fling around and I look at LeVar and I stare at him in the eyes and said, what happened to her? What did you do? Why does she have this? It's puffy under her eye and there's a huge gash under it. I'm fuming at this point. My child is hurt.
Now, what does the foster care system and the psychiatrists that work within the foster care system do when they have traumatized children? In 2011, 2020 covered this in a year-long investigation.
We have spent a year investigating a horrible secret. Tens of thousands of foster care children, even infants, given powerful mind-altering drugs. And remember this statistic. Foster children are given these potent drugs at an alarming 13 times the rate of other children.
These are the meds that I've been taking since I was 4. 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 13.
Lexapro. The last one is Abilify. All the medications, they made me feel as if I had 1,000 bricks on my head.
They are tiny witnesses who came out of the shadows to tell and show us the mountain of potent drugs, antidepressants, antipsychotic drugs they were given in America's foster care system.
I was just a zombie.
I was in 28 homes. I felt sad because no one would keep me or love me.
Consider the case of 7-year-old Brooke, taken from a drug-addicted mother, just 43 pounds. But given 5 mind-altering drugs at the same time, a combination that is deemed too risky even for adults. Chianti prescribed 12 medications over the course of 4 years for conditions doctors now say he didn't have.
I'm not ADHD, I'm just naughty. I am not bipolar at all.
This is footage of Chianti trying to come off these medications.
I was prescribed 7 or 8 different pills. I gained almost or over 100 pounds.
My name is Crystal. I'm 15. I have been in 26 placements. I feel like I have almost disappeared from everybody's point of view.
By the way, your taxpayer dollars are paying for this. Medicaid pays for these drugs.
The 2020 episode also highlighted that one of these children ended up taking his life at 7 years old.
Get a minute to talk to us. Florida doctor Syesha Panjwani is one of the true believers in these medications for kids. He was the doctor assigned to treat 7-year-old Gabriel Myers. Gabriel's father was in jail, his mother addicted to prescription drugs. One day she passed out in a Denny's parking lot with the engine running, 6-year-old Gabriel in the car. When Florida police found them hours later, they took her to jail, and Gabriel was placed in foster care. During the next months, Gabriel was moved from home to home, therapist to therapist. He started acting out and trashing his room. Dr. Syesha Panjwani became Gabriel's psychiatrist, paid for by the state of Florida. 7 times Gabriel was driven to Dr. Panjwani's office, and often leaving with a changing mix of prescriptions for powerful psychotropic drugs. Gabriel's behavior got worse. Then, one afternoon, he did the unimaginable.
911, what's your emergency?
The 7-year-old locked himself in the bathroom of his foster home, screaming, "I deserve to die," stood on the edge of the tub, and hung himself with a shower hose.
And many of these children describe being taken away from their families because they had parents that were on drugs. This is not less traumatizing. Their families probably just needed help and assistance. And it should be no surprise, considering the statistics that we just looked at, that nearly half of foster children in the United States end up homeless. To finish, Carlos Morales says, let's look at mortality rate. Children are 6 times more likely to die in foster homes than if they had stayed in an abusive household. Politicians in every state know about this. Congress knows about this. The media has covered it extensively. And yet here we are again in 2021 with the same statistics producing over and over again. The director of the CPS in Baltimore gives a powerful 11-minute TED Talk.
Among the gifts that Albert Einstein left us was a definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. My work is an interesting example. Child welfare. Now there are 50 child welfare agencies in the country, and the funds to underwrite them are in the billions. It's not a one among them that's reputed to be working well. Awful things happen to children in foster care. So in response, a parallel effort arose called systems reform. Now this is the belief that if we could just get government to do child welfare properly, then it would work and everything would be fine. Many more millions of dollars are deployed by foundations to monitors and consultants in an effort to fix things. And yet, we fail. But I was a believer in this fixing thing, and I came to Baltimore. I was back when the agency I run now was considered among the worst in the country, but I knew we could make it work. And we had a good run. Over a 5-year period, we reduced the number of children in foster care by 58%. We reduced the number of kids living in orphanages by 89%. We increased adoptions 59%. We increased the number of kids that left foster care for families by 47%, and we paid all our bills on time. So accolades and awards start rolling in, and I really appreciate that because we fixed it. And now, I run a well-oiled machine that does an outstanding job of taking other people's children. Abuse and neglect is awful for children. It's terrible, absolutely. When we also then take them from their families, we're digging a wound so deep, I don't believe we have a way of measuring it. This dismantling of families, it has enormous consequences. Kids that grow up outside of families, they don't master the things that can only be learned in that context, like who to trust and how to love and how to take care of yourself. And that, frankly, does more damage than the abuse and neglect that brought the kid to my attention in the first place. And that's when I understood. The reason child welfare isn't working is because there are children in foster care. It's not that government's doing it badly. It's that foster care is a bad idea. The error is the intervention.
And CPS really fails on both ends of the spectrum. On one hand, they spend the majority of their time ripping apart and policing innocent families, and then on the other hand, they fail miserably at actually removing children from homes where there is egregious and horrific abuse taking place. The CPS investigator that made false claims against Syesha and Tyron, she was caught up in one of these cases herself as well. On September 23rd, investigator Danielle Mccoy was assigned a complaint that came in through the child abuse hotline alleging that Keshana Thomas had punched and slammed her then 12-year-old's head into a mirror. It was during this investigation that she found out Jania, her 11-year-old daughter, was discovered missing. Now, Danielle Mccoy did not know this at the time, but Jania was missing because her mother had killed her and her body was inside of a freezer. But what Danielle Mccoy did know is that her department had been getting calls about abuse from this mother for 11 years. Danielle McCoy's job at that point was to make sure that this 11-year-old girl, Jania, who the mother had no alibi for, was reported missing. But she didn't do that. McCoy documents her attempts to gather information from the mother as to Jania's whereabouts, however, closed the case on October 9th without locating her. Investigator Sergeant Joseph Scala wrote in the Internal Affairs report, furthermore, McCoy did not report her as missing to Bradenton Police Department, nor did she enter her as missing into the Florida Safe Families Network system. Why would she not have reported this 11-year-old girl as missing, and why would she be able to continue working after this? And all that Danielle Mccoy got was a letter of reprimand for not reporting her missing. Danielle Mccoy has the power to dismiss this case and bring Amon-Ra home, which she is not doing.
every single day we got to wake up. We have to look at our baby setup and look at their swings and look at their bedding, and they're not here, and we have not committed any crime. We have not abused our babies. We have not done anything that is irresponsible as parents. And we have law enforcement watching us and following us and tracking us and listening to us every single second as if we have a criminal background. So if this can happen to us, it can happen to anybody.
They are active in their community. Syesha has a day named after her and was given the keys to the city for being an exemplary citizen. They have full custody of Tyron's 3 older children. The standard of care that their children receive is above what most of the children in the general population get. Tyron has a degree in educational studies, and he has a career mentoring foster children. He works with the foster care system. He works directly with the children who have been traumatized by it. They have been going through the dependency case process for 6 months, begging for this case to be dismissed based on there being no evidence of medical neglect, according to Florida's own statutes. In every step of this process, the family has been disrespected. They have been mocked in court by the guardian ad litem, who is supposed to be the voice of their child, ignored by the judge. Now, a guardian ad litem is a controversial figure that I really want to bring your attention to for a moment, because they play a crucial role in keeping families separated. They are assigned directly to your child to act as the voice of the child. They are inherently not for the family. The position is usually volunteer, and they can be interchangeably called CASAs as well, court-appointed special advocates. Studies that are facilitated by their own foundations find again and again that their biggest accomplishments are keeping families separated and delaying reunification. Here's a report from 2021 focusing on just Florida's guardian ad litem and CASA program. Attorneys and one judge expressed concern that volunteers' personal experiences and biases may lead them to confound the safety of the parent's home with what they think is a better home environment with a foster parent, resulting in more frequent recommendations for termination of parental rights. One of the most horrifying facts about CASA is that they can be a de facto judge, since the real judge in family court nearly always backs the CASA's recommendation. A woman named Rhonda Edwards has been appointed to be Amun-Ra's voice in court. She has mocked Syesha and Tyron because they buy organic vegan groceries to give to the caretakers to feed their son in foster care. She has tried to frame homeschooling in a negative light because they homeschool Tyron's 3 older kids. It was Rhonda who was one of the people who said that Tyron's mother was too aligned with the family and that's why she shouldn't get him. And then when Rhonda was alerted that Aset was going to be returned to her family, she filed a motion at 11:58 p.m. on the night before Aset was going to be returned, asking the judge not to return their baby Aset to them because the kids were doing so well in their foster home and it would be traumatizing to remove them now. She clearly has a bias against Syesha and Tyron, and she wants these kids to stay in foster care. The judges pay very close attention to what the guardian ad litem says. Is that what's happening with their judge as well? I would say absolutely yes. While researching this judge, I found that he himself has also worked as a volunteer guardian ad litem. And then just in April 2021, he was interviewed for Guardian Ad Litem Appreciation Day, and here are some of his quotes. Judge Gilbert Smith Jr., who was recently appointed to dependency court, knows from firsthand experience what it means to be a guardian ad litem. During his time as a volunteer, he said, "Besides the children, I felt like I might have been the most important person the judge was listening to. Thank goodness we have guardian ad litems," Judge Smith says. "I don't know how we could do our job without them." Judge Smith said he listens closely to the guardian ad litems because they are solely focused on the child and can be more objective about the case. At the time this article was published, Judge Gilbert Smith had already been seeing Syesha and Tyron inside dependency court. So clearly he is self-admittedly has been listening to Rhonda Edwards over the family. Now what they want this family to do is admit that they are guilty of medical neglect, which they are not. So why on earth would the court system and CPS be trying to force a family who has literally done nothing except for love and care for their child to admit guilt and enter a system that they can never get out of? There are multiple factors that make someone more vulnerable to intervention with CPS, and Syesha and Tyron fit more than one of them. In a 2018 report, Black children represented 14% of the population, but yet 23% of the population in foster care. Tyron brought to my attention the work of Jessica Price.
I met a brave leader a few years ago in Nassau County, New York. She was determined to address the disparate outcomes for Black youth in her foster care system. She started by educating her organization on implicit bias, that automatic and unconscious system that lives in all of us. She created a process where your personal opinion and values could not directly impact what happened to a family. It became known as blind removal meetings, where a caseworker goes out to a home and meets the family and does a risk assessment, but then comes back to the organization to confer on what to do next. But in that meeting, demographic information is redacted. So the decision to remove a child from their family or not is made never knowing the race of the child or even where they live. This process decreased removals across the board, but notably decreased removals of Black children by nearly 50%.
In 2014 in Florida, there were multiple police officers that were fired because the FBI found that they were active members inside of the KKK. When one of them was interviewed, he said that when he was on the force, probably 10 out of the 12 full-time officers were either members or sympathetic to the group. This is modern history. Whether it's overt racism or internal belief systems that we have based on stereotypes, it's doing real-life harm to families. They are also a holistic family, which puts another target on your back. The system is held up at the top by the medical industrial complex. In Chicago, there's a class action lawsuit from multiple parents who had had their babies taken at birth just for refusing the vitamin K shot. CPS said that it alerts them of possible neglect that can happen in the future.
The American Academy of Pediatrics calls vitamin K an indicator of future parental health care decision-making behavior. Lori's grand entrance in Illinois was at a time that DCFS considered it possible medical neglect to deny these procedures.
This is crazy. You know, we're her parents.
Courtney Hill and James.
We have to demand that Amin Ra be returned to his parents. The calls to action are below. Lend your gifts and your voice in any way possible to help reunite this family.
But at the same time, we are angry at you. We just want our babies back, and we want everybody that has been a part of removing our children to be held accountable. It's that simple.
This is my first time being a mom. And I've been deprived of holding my babies and feeding my babies. I didn't get to see Ra say mama for the first time. And I didn't get to see my babies meet for the first time.
It's going to take the public's consistent advocacy to say that we will not tolerate innocent families being torn apart.
My name's Louis Baptiste. I'm an attorney on this case. I want you to repeat after me. We've been in court fighting, and Ra's not here. And so we have to say it so that Ra can hear it where he's at, so that his spirit can understand that even though he's not present, we have a group of people as collectives fighting to bring him home. And so I'll say it again, it is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love each other and support each other.
We must love each other and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our change.
We have nothing to lose but our change.